All right, welcome into Floor is Yours, an extension of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Sponsored, as you can see, by Biscayne Bay Brewing. Also sponsored by our friend Mark Brown. You can find it at markbrownpa.com. He's been a sponsor of the podcast 5 on the Floor for quite a while. He's now going to be our official sponsor here of Floor is Yours going forward for the next couple months of the season. Again, if you're looking for someone who can help you with real estate litigation or transaction law, this is the guy to go to. Commercial and residential law firm. Also has an attorney-owned title company right there. In fact, taking care of the title for me as I'm selling my condo here in the next couple of weeks. Mark is taking care of it for me. Why am I using him? Because he's good. He knows what he's doing. And also, when you mentioned 5 Reasons, you get a $295 closing fee on all refinances and purchases. Also, he handles evictions for both sides, landlords or tenants. He offers flat fee evictions. Practicing for 15 years. You guys are making fun of my headphones, aren't you? Are you chatting with each other? What are you doing?
They were making fun of Tito.
Yeah. That wouldn't be the first time I've heard that. That's the funniest part. Like, all right. Mike Ryan doppelganger.
Oh, there you go. All right, so that's there on the bottom there. Anyway, check out Mark at 954-566-5678. That's 954-566-5678. Or again, at Mark, that's with a C, M-A-R-C, Brown, PA.com. Big Miami sports fan, ran into him in a Dolphin game. This is definitely the guy that you want to use. So it's right there on the bottom of the screen. All right, we're waiting for our fourth tonight. He was here. He left. We sent him back to the Skyforce. But I do have one of our regulars here, one of our starters, Alex Toledo, up at the top. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. We brought in the doppelganger here, Tito Minaj, who I guess works for Onside Radio now. I don't really know. But I think you do. Used to work for ESPN and also used to work for 5 Reasons, actually, in one capacity.
I did.
We're bringing you back in the fold. And then Ariel will be back with us here at some point as soon as we get him back from Sioux Falls. But let's get started with the news from yesterday. Now, Alex and I kind of handled this on the podcast last night on 5 on the Floor. But Tito, I mean, obviously you've been following all this trade stuff. What was your reaction to the Ariza acquisition for Myers Leonard and a 2027 second-round pick?
Well, the first reaction is they got him for legitimately nothing. This was probably the most net zero gain trade the Heat have ever made, considering in recent light events with what happened with Leonard, and also a 2027 second rounder who's in 7th grade and isn't going to ever help the Heat, considering Pat Riley's perspective on second round picks. I love the fact that Ariza kind of comes in the same mindset as like Iguodala did, which is on a team that was basically saying, hey, thanks, but no thanks. We don't kind of want you here. And Ariza was kind of like, all right, that's fine with me. I'll just train and get in better shape, and I don't want to play with you either. He slides right in. I like it a lot. I think, Ethan, you kind of mentioned that this is a guy that He'd have been pursuing for quite some time now. And the biggest thing that I kind of think about when the Heat make this trade is essentially that when the shot clock is running down and the Heat are running out of options to shoot, it's no longer Andre Iguodala forcing up a three-pointer. Instead, it's Trevor Ariza. Mm-hmm. And just off the bat, you have to feel a little bit better about that. Now, obviously, I don't think Ariza is going to light up the scoreboard with shooting, but he's long enough. He knows how to play defense. He has, the experience guarding the 4 and the 3, which is kind of exactly what Miami needed. And it takes a little bit of pressure off of Iguodala as well as Kelly Olynyk.
This comes in. You mentioned that the kid is in 7th grade right now. He'll probably be writing for 5 Reasons, replacing Brady because Brady's gotten too old. That's actually probably who they've acquired at this point. I don't really see any downside either. I think Alex and I discussed this last night. I mean, this didn't keep them from doing anything else. That's the other thing. You have a limited number of assets. Didn't prevent them from doing anything. I mean, honestly, if Ariza came in here and gave you no more than Harkless has, you didn't lose anything. The odds are he's going to give you more than Harkless has because it would be impossible to give you less, right? So I think that they're fine there. It looks like he's going to play for the weekend. This series against Indiana, Friday and Sunday, he is on track for that. He's gone through the COVID protocols. As Ariel, I believe. Oh my God, we just dropped you in from Sioux Falls.
I made it. I had some technical difficulties, but we're here. We're on the phone, so we're going to make it work.
All right, that's fine. Okay, well, let me know. There you go. Let me know how South Dakota is this time of year. Mike Miller told me there's a beautiful Applebee's. All right, but let's get back to Ariza here, and we'll let Ariel kind of jump in.
The beautiful Applebee's.
There is. I asked Mike Miller because he's from Sioux Falls, and I asked him. I said, "Where did you eat?" He says, "There's the best Applebee's you've ever seen is in Sioux Falls. He says, that's it. But there
Sounds a lot like Connecticut. That sounds a lot like Connecticut.
I've been to Bristol too. I apologize to you for having to live there. All right, but let's go to you on this, Ariel, before we get to more. The Ariza fit. I think everybody likes the move. There's no reason not to like the move. I don't think he's a starter though. Like people are projecting him to start. If Kelly is still here, and I know Woj reported that Kelly's on the block. We've talked everything Woj said today. We've been saying for the last 3 weeks. Okay, there was really nothing new. I guess now people believe it because Woj said it. But everything he talked about today, we'll go through it. We've been talking about on 5 on the Floor. But I still think even with Ariza, Kelly's a starter. I just think Ariza may be a closer. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I tend to disagree. I actually think that Trevor Ariza winds up starting for this team because within that starting 5, he offers the Heat more switchability at the position and kind of unlocks their lineups, much in the way that Jay Crowder did last season. And it allows them to get back to the style of defense that they want to play and play it more effectively. When you're able to switch everything on the court, it masks a lot of the deficiencies that this team has had when they've had to play the drop and guys just constantly are out of position and have to recover to shooters when they collapse in the paint and whatnot. So I tend to think that he's going to end up starting. I think he was really, really good for Portland in his time there last season, right? He averaged like 11, 5, 2, 1.5 steals, shot 40% from 3, 49% from the field. So last we saw him, he was a pretty productive player. I think he fits better with the Heat, and my gut tells me that he ends up starting for them at playoff time.
Well, let me ask you this about the defense, though, and then get to Kelly, because you make a lot of good points there. But we also know that Spoelstra always likes to hold a move back. Mm-hmm. This has been his history. He waits to make a move. Last year, it was Dragic into the starting lineup. Jay Crowder happened, obviously, a little bit before that. I could see it being a situation, again, if Kelly is still here, where Kelly continues to start, but game 1 of the playoffs, Trevor Ariza is starting. He's done that kind of thing before. But you mentioned the defense. We're going to break down the defense. Steve Jones Jr., who's Nikias' co-host on the Dunker Spot, is going to join us this Tuesday. And all we're going to do is talk about how they've become such a good defensive team, because that was not the case last season with virtually the same personnel in a lot of spots. They don't have Jay. They've been playing Kelly heavy minutes, and yet they've been really good defensively. We'll go around, and I'll start with you, Ariel, and then we'll switch back around. I mean, do you want to take Kelly out of the starting lineup right now with the way that he's playing? Because you can make a case statistically he's been their third best player.
You absolutely can. And just to speak to that point specifically before I address your actual question, is that over the last 5 games before last night, where he had a bad game, but he was in foul trouble, and, I think that significantly limited his ability to contribute in the way that he had been in the 5 games preceding that game. 4 of those games came when Bam was out of the lineup, and he's averaging like 16, 8, and 4 on really good percentages, 56% from the field, 57% from 3. He's stepped it up on defense. I do think that he's played really well, but I'm pretty against the whole Kelly thing. I don't think that come playoff time that, you can be successful with him starting at the 4 or the 5, because he just won't be, he'll be played off the court in a lot of those matchups. If they match up with Brooklyn, if they match up with Philly, it's really hard for him to have a matchup defensively that benefits him and where he doesn't get cooked and played off the floor. So I think you might be right in that, Spoelstra doesn't like to show his hand until playoff time. And so he did that last season, right? Inserting Goran into the starting 5 at playoff time. We could see something similar with Ariza, but the reason I think that Trevor Ariza starts before the playoffs, if not at least by the playoffs, is that there's not a ton of familiarity with the team, whereas with Goran, that was already there. He'd been a part of the roster and played with their best players for a few years, before the playoffs. And so maybe with Trevor, it's one of those things that you want to get him into the starting 5 and get him accustomed to the players that he's playing with. You're able to play the style of defense that you're going to employ in the playoffs. It might be something that Eric Spoelstra ramps up and works towards. But yeah, I do think I see Trevor starting. I don't know if it's right away, but again, by playoff time, I think he's going to end up being the starter. It just fits. It fits better than Kelly in my mind.
I just want to transition, and thanks, Curtis, for the donation there. We appreciate it, so I can buy some better headphones. But let's. I want to go to Tito and to Alex on this, because we talk about the starting lineup. And look, every game there was a different starting lineup for like the first 20 games. And then they kind of settled on something. And then I thought because Kendrick Nunn was playing so well that it would become somewhat permanent. Kendrick Nunn's not playing so well again. Would either of you, Tito or Alex, make a change to the starting lineup in the backcourt at this stage? Or do you leave it alone?
That's actually a good question. I have not thought about that at all. I mean, the Kendrick thing, man, you know how I feel as far as him being a starter. He's played better as a starter than as a bench player, but it's not a bad idea because clearly, like, the offense is just it's still a question, right? Like, it's still a huge question. So adding somebody like a Goran or Tyler, who you think might be able to do a little bit more for you on that end, might make sense. But then what happens if Kendrick just goes back to being, kind of unplayable? And I think you got to keep his value up as much as you can. But yeah, he hasn't played as well since he had that great run. But man, I think honestly I would still keep him. I think I would still keep him starting just because I don't buy Tyler or Goran really making that much of a difference as far as the regular season offense. Like, I think it comes down to more than who's starting at that position as to why they're struggling so much.
Tito, would you make a change? And then let me follow with this question. I was looking at Hero's numbers, and for a while he was projecting better than he did last season. Everything but the shooting percentage. But now all of a sudden the other numbers have kind of come back to where they were, and the shooting percentage is still down from where it was last year. Again, you're talking about 39% from three to 33% from three is significant for a guy who came in as a shooter with the turnovers being up. And on a per minute basis, he's a little bit up in rebounds and assists, but again, it's not significant anymore. What do you do with the guard rotation? You start none? You try to get Dragic or Hero going by putting one of them in the starting lineup, or you just, I know you're going to say play Chalmers. We'll get to your Chalmers memories in the last 3 minutes. But I mean, what do you do there with the guard rotation?
I think I'm still rolling, at least for the regular season, I'm still rolling with Kendrick. I think sometimes we kind of operate on this, like tug the leash as soon as he has a bad night, or he, like right now, like you said, he's had a bad couple stretch of games. But I'm more of the mindset that if you're going to make a move with that backcourt specifically related to Goran or Tyler, I'd rather that be a playoff kind of incentivized move, right? Yeah. Because I'm not trying to waste Goran's legs on regular season wins when it matters when you get into that first round and you really need his production. Now, as far as it goes with guys like Tyler, it's kind of like pick your poison with him, just because if Tyler gets going from the very beginning of the game, you have a chance for potentially a 25 point night from Tyler. But I think we well and saw the struggles he had when he was kind of forced into that ball handler point guard role. And I thought there was kind of a groove where he was kind of coming back, and he's kind of going through that sophomore slump. Like you noted, the shooting is down, turnovers are up. I don't know if that's, something that I'm, concerned about long-term with Tyler. I just think if I'm the Heat right now and I have this mindset of we're going to have to make a decision on Kendrick Nunn at the end of this offseason, one way or another, we're going to have to. I would like to see him in the starting lineup for that exact reason, because if you yank him and his play drops again, then we don't know what we have with Kendrick Nunn going into the end of the season regardless. So that's where I obviously, the regular season isn't nearly as important, but if you go into the playoffs, you can't be wasting your time with Kendrick Nunn in the starting lineup if he's just simply not producing. And that's where I would go to a guy like Goran. With Tyler, I think there's much less of a time crunch on figuring out what you have there when that, come playoff time, coming off the bench, he might be better than other teams' sixth or seventh man.
Let me get to both of them with you here, Ariel, and two different concerns that I have. Goran Dragic, and I know Adam wants to trade Goran Dragic for a third round pick in 2032 if that actually existed. I'm telling you, unless it's Kyle Lowry, and I think that's what Adam's getting at here, Jimmy Butler is not going to allow it. Okay, so I mean that's really the only player in the league that I think Jimmy might relent on it. Otherwise, it's not happening. And I don't think it's a direction the Heat want to go after, obviously, the whole Dwayne Wade situation and trying to make things right with Goran at the end here. But the two concerns I have here are, one, the only real game Goran Dragic has had in the past, he's had two games. He had obviously the 20-point fourth quarter, and he played really well against Utah. The Utah game, he got to the rim a little bit more. But even the explosion he had the other night, the 20 points, was all stuff at the elbow or beyond. He's not getting to the rim. That's my concern about him. My concern about Tyler is this. Eric Spoelstra continues to play him every single damn minute of the fourth quarter, and yet Tyler's fourth quarter minutes this year are terrible. His numbers all go down. I looked at them today. It is his worst quarter this season is the fourth quarter. Can you continue to play him this much in the fourth? Not only as a closer, he starts the damn fourth. And can you trust Goran if, again, you're talking about a guy who right now he's not getting to the rim?
So just real quick before Adam gets aggregated again for the 1,000th time and then gets on me for not having his back here, he does not literally want to trade Goran for a first rounder. He knows that Jimmy would riot. He was saying that purely from a business standpoint, it would make sense. All right, now that I've gotten that out of the way.
I will say
that
I will say that, Ariel, there's been much laughter inside the Heat front office about that particular take, whether or not you decide to clarify it.
As far as Goran goes, I think that coming into the season, a lot of the dialogue around here and amongst Heat fans and on Heat Twitter was that, we wanted Goran's minutes to kind of go down a little bit and have him ramp up towards the playoffs. Now, he's missed some time, so there is an element of rest that comes with that. However, I think every year, at least for the past couple of seasons, last season and this season included, his ability to get into the paint and willingness to attack the rim has decreased substantially, just because I think he's lost a step athletically for sure. Now, he's compensated for that by adding the three-point jump shot and a lot of those floaters in the lane. He's gotten better with that. But I think we're seeing more of a downturn from him athletically and in terms of his overall production, which coincides with that this season. To me, the solution is to start Tyler, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this in response to this question, but I would trade Duncan so fast because you cannot play Tyler and Duncan together defensively. I don't want to pay Duncan I'm glad you agree with me. Now, I also don't want to pay Duncan. I think that some of the issues with starting Tyler earlier in the season is that they kind of put him in a role that he wasn't ready for, where they put the ball in his hands more than he was prepared to handle and forced him into a spot where he had to be the primary ball handler and offensive initiator. Now,
Ariel, they agree with you, by the way. They believe they made a mistake there.
They're much smarter than I am.
So.
Good. They're much smarter than I am. But what I think is that, I do think that those reps will benefit him in the long term and that will be a good thing for him. However, he's not there yet. I do think, though, you can bring him back into the starting five. If you can find a way to get something in return for Duncan to where you don't have to pay him and you can start Tyler perhaps with a better defensive guard, Victor Oladipo, anyone, and take the ball out of Tyler's hands, run more of your offense through Jimmy, through Bam, and to an extent through Oladipo. You can put the ball in Tyler's hands a little bit more when he's going against second units, and I think that it would go better the second time around if the Heat made those adjustments when reinserting Tyler into the starting five.
I'm gonna get out of the way. Ariel and I are gonna get out of the way. I'm gonna let Tito and Alex handle this because I know that there's not two people on the planet who have more diametrically opposed perspectives on the Duncan Robinson thing. Okay,
I'll let Alex go first.
Alex, you defend keeping and paying Duncan because that is sort of the.
Is this first take? What is this going on here? You're putting us on opposite sides of the ring.
I don't look as good as whoever hosts first take. You have been the Duncan defender on this. Okay, I'm a little bit more in the middle. I know where Tito is because Tito has basically been kicked off of Twitter because of his Duncan takes. We're getting out of the way. Go.
Well, look, by the way, I'm glad that Ariel, I love his takes, and he's over here pushing the Oladipo agenda. I love it. We got more people on the train.
That's not what we're talking about. Duncan. Defend keeping Duncan.
I just wanted to start that off. But my whole thing with Duncan has been don't trade him unless it's for something that absolutely makes sense to make you better, right? So I think for the purpose of trading Duncan just for whatever, or, not to bring Adam back into this, even though as much as I like to, I would have just sell him off for picks unless there's a reason you're doing that, right? Like you have to do that to nab a Bradley Beal if he ever becomes available. Now, in this situation where we're talking about potentially adding a Victor Oladipo, I'm into that part. Like, we have Ben in the comments talking about, Lonzo, and other people have talked about JJ Redick. And so like a trade like that where you get somebody back to kind of replicate what Duncan does, maybe he's not at quite as high a level, but if you're getting, let's say, if you're somehow doing a 3-team deal, you get back Oladipo and Redick. I think that's something where like, yeah, I'm willing to trade Duncan. But if you're not trading him for something that I think is like an upgrade, I think you pay him. And like, I still do agree in general that you got to split up that shooting core because there's just not enough offense defense balance, between the guys that we were talking about as far as Hero, Nunn, Dragic, Duncan, some of those, like one or two of those guys are going to end up having to get traded, right? And so I'm not against trading them. And I think, like, what would you guys do, right? What type of deals are you guys talking about when you think about trading Duncan?
Tito, go. What kind? Go. I mean, you trade him for anything? You just trade him because you don't want to pay him?
No, I don't think you're trading him for, a bag of potato chips or like a second rounder, right? Like, you're not trading him for like a lower bench option. You're trying to get value. And like, I think first and foremost, any trade that Duncan is involved with has to come with somebody back that is at the very least playable right now, right? Like that's the bare minimum. And I think the idea of trading him for like a first rounder, like it's like in theory it makes somewhat sense. But my whole thing with Duncan is this: the league has clearly adjusted to his play style, and that's not to say that he isn't a good player or he's not a great shooter, and that he doesn't do a lot of good things for the Heat, because he does. There's no question that Duncan Robinson opens up the court for the Heat and allows guys like Jimmy and Bam and even Tyler, to a degree sometimes when they play together, to thrive a little bit more. But the issue with that is when you enter the offseason, you have to set a number at his value. And I don't know how you can look at the way he's been playing as of recent and the way teams have kind of figured his game out to a degree and feel comfortable paying upwards of 17, 18. I mean, Ethan, you probably know this number better than I do, but it's probably in that range of what. Well, no,
I said months ago 18 to 20, and I mean that's
right.
It's been repeated by a million people since, and I still think that's the range. I still think that's
right, and that's the range, and teams are going to match it. There's no question about that. Now, I don't know how, as a Heat fan, as someone who follows the team, you can feel comfortable committing to that with a guy that when his shooting is not there, his value drops dramatically. And so, I like it. To me, it's a situation where you're being negligent by not at least testing his market. But
I think, Tito, here's the biggest thing, and I think you've hit on it. But I think the decision they're going to make is simple: can he close games or not? Can he consistently close games or not? Because what they've been looking for in the trade market is more closers. They don't. The crazy thing about the Heat is they don't care about their starting lineup. Spoelstra doesn't care about it. It's always been about keeping the bench rotation intact. He's made it clear to Riley and Andy and all the others, get me players I trust to close. Now, this comment came in here, why doesn't none close? It's very simple. He doesn't trust Kendrick to close. That's why. Now, I think Kendrick's made progress in some areas, but they don't trust Kelly to close, they don't trust Kendrick to close, and they don't trust Duncan to close. This is who they trust to close. Bam, Jimmy, Dragic, although I think that's getting a little more questionable if he can't get to the rim. Hero, getting more questionable if he's going to keep shooting 33% in the fourth quarter, and Iguodala. That's it. And that's why they went to get Ariza. Would they trust Oladipo to close? They would, okay? So I think that's part of it. And I want to pivot there to Oladipo then, okay? Because I know Alex wants to go there. And here's my question. If you know that he wants to be here, and it's 100% he wants to be here, okay? Now, will he accept a trade to Golden State or something like that? Yes. But he wants to be here. Don't you just let the market play itself out until Houston has no other options? Or are you worried about the fact that some Golden State or some other team jumps in and convinces him that it's a viable place to stay? Because really the only other benefit you're getting, other than keeping another team from getting him now, obviously, which is part of it, is that you get his bird rights, which would allow you to sign Duncan and do some of these other things. So I'll ask all three of you. I mean, I'm not against getting Oladipo. I just don't want to give up a lot of assets for Oladipo. That's my thing. But am I wrong? Any of you can jump in on this.
I think you're not wrong, but the way that I look at it is
get out of here.
Did Adam log in? What's going on here?
No, it's just bad. No, I'll tell you. They got a first for PJ Tucker, so I wasn't wrong about what the market value was. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the Bucks don't know what the hell they're doing. But as far as
another story, I don't know the Bucks. Go on.
As far as the Heat are,
Ethan claiming a W on that, on the technicality of that pick swap.
They got a first round. They got a better pick. Go ahead, Aaron.
As far as the Heat are concerned, the reason I would include either Duncan or, obviously in my eyes, maybe not in your eyes, Ethan, because I've heard you say things to the contrary, Kendrick Nunn in a Victor Oladipo deal, would be because both are going to be free agents this summer anyways. And so you're essentially choosing if you want to pay Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson, or Victor Oladipo. So unless you're able to put Duncan Robinson in some sort of deal perhaps for a John Collins that brings you back somebody that you would hold in higher regard, I would absolutely put him in a Victor Oladipo deal. I know the Heat's offense is atrocious. I understand that. They're like 25th in offensive rating. However, they're third in the NBA in defensive rating and third in the NBA in opponent points per game allowed. I'm of the opinion that they're so far off offensively that you might as well just sell off on guys like Duncan and Kendrick Nunn. If you can get a Victor Oladipo in return, double down on what you're good at. You want to be a good defensive team? Be a great defensive team, because that translates to the playoffs.
I don't even think you need to give up a Duncan to get Oladipo. I obviously have no reporting, no sources. I always love to put that up front because that's not what I do at all for 5 on the floor, 5 reasons. But like, it just doesn't make sense to me that Oladipo would. I mean, maybe the Rockets could ask for one of these guys like Duncan, but
Right.
I just don't understand how they can see themselves as in that position to actually expect that, right? And like Ethan has said, we know that they like KZ, but could you put together an offer for Oladipo where it's centered around KZ, Kendrick Nunn, and then the salary filler you have to probably pick between Kelly and Andre, which is where it gets tough. In my eyes, just off the top of my head, I would probably go Kelly. I would have to really think about it. But let's say you're throwing Kelly in there.
But Alex, if you throw Kelly in, I mean, Precious is unplayable right now.
Oh, don't go there.
So he is, and I like Precious. You're down. You playing Precious in the
I'm
playoff
just saying,
series right now against the Nets?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
So
he's an energy big, but I'm just talking about like you got to give up Kelly or Andre to match. And this is, by the way, I was going to say this earlier. I'm always trashing Adam, but he did make a good point about the one con of the Myers for Ariza trade is that they have one less guy that they could throw. And now, like in a deal, like let's say you tried to trade for Victor Oladipo, you got to give up one of your rotation players, which we know the Heat don't want to do. But I guess like you got Ariza, so it makes Iguodala a little bit expendable. So I think you can get away with it still if you're really upgrading there. If Oladipo really turns out to be that upgrade and pick up a big from somewhere else, like you got Dwayne Dedmon sitting there. You got obviously Boogie Cousins, who I don't really think is good anymore. I mean, I feel like you could fish in the trade market for a backup, another big if you need to. I don't know, like a Rashawn Holmes from the Kings. You know what I'm saying?
Alex, the obvious guy is the guy obviously that Adam's talking about. Is that I don't think they make that trade unless they know they're getting LaMarcus.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
They're planning on using the traded player exception to replace Kelly Olynyk with Nemanja Bjelica.
Mm-hmm. Who, by the way, is shooting in like the 20s from 3, isn't he? Like, I mean,
he'll get the Jay Crowder treatment over here and see that improvement. You can bet on that.
Tito, go ahead.
Well, no, I just wanted to point something out regarding Depot. Like, I'm with you guys. Like, I am for getting Depot if it doesn't involve like.
For you would be an
Yeah, I'm giving up. I'm giving up Nunn. I can give up Duncan, or I can give up Precious. A reasonable trade, right? I'm not going to get into the specifics because I don't have my favorite ESPN trade machine in front of me. But like something that I'm going to note though is like, out of all the guys we're mentioning, who's the only one that can go get you a bucket late in the game and doesn't need a dribble handoff or someone else to drive and then find him in the corner for a shot? That's Duncan. And like, I love his game. He's a valuable 3-point shooter. But like the idea that the Heat won't run into another guy that they can find who is a really good 3-point shooter, it's kind of ridiculous, right?
But, so what are you giving up? I mean, like for example, let's say that like you can get Oladipo. I don't know. I don't want to just make the whole show about him, but I just think it's a good like barometer for how to talk about Duncan. Oladipo being somebody who we think is available. We know is not going to re-sign with Houston, etc. I think it's a good example to throw out there because like. Let's say you can get him without giving up a Duncan Robinson. I think that's exactly what you need to make Duncan even better because they're just relying on him too much. He has to take 14 threes a game, and I feel like that's somebody else who can collapse the floor and make it easier on him.
Alex, until they figure out a better way to use Duncan Robinson within their offense, and until he adds more of an off-the-dribble game to where when guys – try to crowd him coming off of that dribble handoff or the screen, and he's able to take a few steps into the paint and make pull-up jumpers from the mid-range at a consistent basis. I don't think there's a counter there, and I personally am not comfortable paying somebody.
He has no counter.
I'm not comfortable paying somebody Joe Harris money if he relies solely on Bam to get the majority of his offense.
But that's what I'm saying. If we get an Oladipo type, it makes it easier. So like you have so much more variety in the offense where you're not relying on Duncan for the 14 threes. And that's why I feel like you get a guy who goes in that pecking order there, puts Duncan a slot down, and all of a sudden you feel a lot better about him. And look, like I understand not wanting to pay him. I do think it is a steep price for him. I understand that.
Absolutely.
But man, it's like once you get that core together, that's the market for putting together a championship team. And I think, like, let's say I haven't actually looked into the numbers of what it would be if you had to keep Oladipo and Robinson. I think that would be extremely expensive. You would have to move out of Kendrick. You would have to, you're going to get the money, the relief from Kelly and Andre eventually, and it would get tight. But I think that's kind of what happens when you try to trade for a championship core. You try to add an upgrade like that, and I'm not letting Duncan walk. There's no way. I don't care what the price is.
No way.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing with that, and I told Ethan this before, right? Like Ariel mentioned Joe Harris, right? And like it's an easy comparison to go from Duncan, what he might get paid, to Joe Harris's contract. But the difference with that team and the reason they paid him is that they have the luxury of having 2 top 10 players to get Joe Harris those looks and know that the defense is constantly going to be pressing down on Durant, Harden, and or Kyrie, right? Like that was even before the Harden acquisition. So like they have the luxury to make that move.
Well, also Tito, Joe has become a pretty decent defender.
He's definitely
and he's better off the dribble than Duncan.
He has more ball skills.
He's got more. There's more to Joe's game. That's the thing. It's just.
Joe Harris has become extremely important to the Nets, and that's why they paid up for him, because they know that they need a guy like that to compete. But my one counter to what you're saying is, and I don't disagree, but my one counter is like, the Heat's best players are non-shooting superstars, which is the complete opposite of the Brooklyn Nets, which got Kyrie, KD, and Harden, 3 of the best shooting superstars we've ever seen. And so that's why it makes me I'm even more hesitant. Again, like I'm not looking to trade Duncan for JJ Redick, but if you're upgrading and you're going in another place and you're going from Duncan to JJ Redick type, or even, I don't know, you bring Wayne Ellington back and you can and you feel confident that you can like replace the value that Duncan brings, then go ahead. But I don't know. This conversation is always like, if that upgrade trade isn't available, then what are we talking about? You know what I'm saying?
But here's the other thing about this, and Alex, it's a good point, because I know this for sure, and so does Greg. Okay, the same debate that you guys are having about Duncan is going on internally. There is not a monolithic perspective inside the Heat organization.
Not an easy answer
about Duncan Robinson. I can tell you for sure, Eric Spoelstra loves Duncan Robinson. I can tell you that there are some in the front office who think he's expendable. Okay, and so I think that's part of this debate. But I think what it comes down to is, can you play him at the end of games? And I think what we've seen here over the past month is that you cannot, not consistently. And so I think ultimately that's the perspective that's going to win out. I think the perspective is going to be, if Duncan holds value, you're going to trade him. All right, we've gone a little over, but there's 2 more things I want to get to, so let's get to it real quick. LaMarcus Aldridge and Rudy Gay, the situation in San Antonio. The Spurs, I think the Spurs have made a decision internally, from what I've heard, that they're going to part with guys. Okay, they're going with their young core. They've overachieved this year. Pop just wants to turn over a nice young core, probably to Becky Hammond, within the next 2 years. Okay, I think that's Pop's legacy at this stage. Okay, he's not going to win another championship with that group. I think that he wants to be the one who turns it over to a female coach in a good position for her to succeed. With that being the case, do you offer any kind of an asset for LaMarcus Aldridge, or do you just wait for it to play out? And do you offer any kind of an asset for Rudy Gay? We can do this more rapid fire.
As far as LaMarcus goes, there's not a salary on the roster that makes sense in terms of sending out in order to match money there. So the answer would be no. I would wait for him to get bought out. Rudy Gay, I like him as a player. Think he would fit really well with the Heat. But I think with the recent addition of Trevor Ariza, you've already got Andre Iguodala. You've got Bam. As of right now, you still have KO, whom I would move for Rudy Gay in my mind. If you're not doing that, then that one doesn't make a ton of sense to me either. I think you upgrade defensively at the perimeter, and that's the way that you look to go.
Alex, Tito, you trade for LaMarcus, you just wait for it to play out. You don't get him. If he goes back to Portland, it's just the risk that you took.
I'm going to echo everything Ariel said there. I think you wait for him. And look, when we first talked about the Aldridge stuff, when it was first heating up, you guys got me in the heat of the moment to say that I would trade all those guys for him. And I really, after some second thought, I definitely went back on that take, and I'm like, now I don't want to give up Avery and KZ for
Alex. Look, that take lives in perpetuity. I did one trade with the Houston Rockets, and he Twitter exiled me. So
There you go, man. You just got to charge it to the game, right?
I traded a first for PJ Tucker. That's
a tough one, though. You're not going to live that one down.
No, look, he just did that. All right, go ahead. Continue. Sorry. All right, there you go. Look at that. I was at that game. I had to watch that thing in person, and as I left the arena, that's when I tweeted out. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Tito. I'm sorry.
So I think this is going to be the same thing. I'm not trading anything for LaMarcus. I think it's almost with certainty at this point. Like unless somebody comes in with some heroic offer, he's going to get bought out, and that's where I would hope that LaMarcus's relationship with Pat comes through. And I think he's perfect to come in here on the buyout, but I'm not trading for him. Rudy Gay is a little bit more different. I think there is somewhat of an idea where you can maybe, rationalize giving up an Iguodala for a Rudy Gay just because he provides more offensive firepower. But he's another guy that, like, I might just wait to see if he gets bought out potentially. I don't know if any of those guys are worth trading assets for and trying to maximize salaries when, there's a good chance that the Spurs might just blow it up altogether.
I can tell you that they've been working on LaMarcus, okay, behind the scenes. So, I mean, but again, this may be
Is
one
there going
of
to be a
those
surprise DeRozan move next week?
Well, but
Ooh.
is that what – but I'm saying, like, how does Pop – that's not on the Heat. That's on Pop, okay? Like, these other two moves, like Rudy and Aldridge are out of there. But the DeRozan, that is whether Pop just totally sells at this point, okay? And it's
Trading
just
Tyler for DeRozan?
Probably. Yes,
yeah,
I would.
I would.
Yeah.
I would do that. I would do
man.
that. Yeah.
I'd pack his bags for him.
I would.
Wow.
Although DeMar, I love DeMar personally, and I love the way he's developed this game. He's one of the really good dudes in the sport. He's been one of the worst playoff players for a star-level player in the NBA over the past 10 years. He has a lot of Eddie Jones and Jamal Mashburn in him, and that worries me. Like, guys, they're regular season players. You put them in that moment, and their numbers go like this. I thought Tyler was the opposite, but again, his play in the fourth quarter this year has made me question that. So I don't know.
Ethan, all I would say to that is that when DeMar's been presented with those opportunities, he's had to be the best or at worst second best player on his teams if you consider Kyle Lowry the best player on those teams. And so with the Heat, he'd be the third best player and relied upon quite a bit less than he was in those situations. And so I think we might see quite a different outcome.
All right, Adam. All right, last one. We got to give Tito the floor here for the last 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to tell us why the move for the Heat to make is to re-sign Rio. Go.
Oh, I mean, it's immediate backcourt boost. It's an absolute immediate backcourt boost. 25 points in Game 4 of the 2012 NBA Finals. Everybody seems to forget that when he stuffed Westbrook in a locker. But, I want to also say this because Ethan, I texted you this. There's been a lot of grandstanding about Justice Winslow and how his time here at the Heat ended. Do I have the right as a Heat fan to get upset about the same way they traded Rio to Memphis, right? Like, we got Bano Udrih back, and his season ended.
He's a lifer.
Same year.
He is a lifer.
Bano brought them Joe Johnson, though.
He did. That's true. I forgot about that.
You don't remember what happened in there? He had to. They bought him out, and I'm not gonna say what did or didn't happen under a table, but for some reason he took some money and was out of there, and Joe Johnson was there in less than a week.
We do know what happened. Although I will say this, Tito, firsthand experience. Rio told me during that week before the trade, he's like, and I don't want us to lose the monetization here, but he said, if these MFers don't tell me what the F is going on right now, I'm going to go off on this entire effing place. Rio had effing had it with the Heat by the end.
He's the best.
One more thing.
Yes, go ahead.
I need Tito to elaborate on the grandstanding of Justice Winslow.
No. We don't have an hour for that. I'm sorry. We don't have an hour.
I like the guy, but like it's like character assassination, as if like he's like been shipped off to like Liberia or something. It's like he's fine. They made the finals. He's fine. There's no reason to get like this upset about a guy who spent 3 years with the like. This is like me getting upset. That like just viscerally upset about the Heat getting rid of Rio.
Are you mad at fans for having attachments to players that they drafted?
They drafted Rio. Where's Rio?
He started every game. He started every game this rookie season, and like Curtis just said there, he did save Gerald Green. He did. I remember trying to reach Rio that whole day Was trying to reach Rio that whole day. What the hell happened with Gerald? I ain't saying shit. All right, that's it.
Paramedic.
That's it. MarkBrownPA.com, MarkBrownPA.com, MarcBrownPA.com. Again, he's got that closing fee. Mentioned 5 reasons. He also does estate planning too. I think Rio needed some estate planning when he left the Heat because he wasn't going to be making any more money. Tito, thanks for joining us. Follow him at Tito Minaj.
Because I'm a stud.
I don't know what the hell Arnold's doing there. Follow Tropical Blanket, Alex Toledo. And again, thanks to our sponsors and everybody else. Post-game pod tomorrow night. Alex will be down at the arena, probably in that little scouts table again. So follow him and Brady, of course. And get our stuff at 5reasonsports.com. Thanks for being with us.